Welcome to the Jaron Jarvis channel. I am Jaron Jarvis. Today, I would like to introduce to you, my boyfriend hates churches. Do I really have to? My boyfriend whined playfully, tossing our empty gelato cups, the third of the day, into a corner trash can. It had taken us 2 years of saving to afford this vacation to Rome, student loans be damned, and he'd spent the first 3 days reading on the hotel balcony while I explored old world cathedrals. At least, that's what he told me. It was far more likely my sweet idiot Kevin had been catching up on football, leading me to believe the commentary in any language was totally worthless. You skipped the fucking Vatican, not to mention Basilica Parochiale and all the ones in Trastevere. You're coming with me to the Pantheon, or you can refamiliarize yourself with your hands for the next month, I threatened, putting on my best attempt at an Italian accent, hands included. Now in line, I led him through the crowded streets towards the behemoth of a relic, standing proud after so many years. I knew Kevin's history with his family and why he became so anti-religion growing up, but this was about the art. Besides, from what I'd read leading up to our trip, the Pantheon seemed a bit less church-wide than, say, the Sistine Chapel. I wasn't so religious myself, but the Romans truly were brilliant when it came to architecture, among so many other things. His hand left mine for a moment, temporarily distracted by yet another street merchant, as I crossed the threshold and beheld the monumental space. I felt myself breathless, awe-inspired by such a masterpiece. I hardly noticed the dozens of other tourists taking pictures, my own eyes absorbing as much detail as they could drink in. EMS. Emily. I heard, shaking myself from the trance. I could tell by the volume it wasn't the first time Kevin had called out for me. I turned to see him standing about a foot from the entrance, pale and still. I rolled my eyes and walked over hurriedly, intending to yank him inside and berate him later for wasting time. My plan changed drastically when I noticed the tears pouring down his face. I can't do it, EMS, my darling whimpered, practically vibrating with a fear I'd never seen before. So tell me about Mr. Pickle, Amanda teased, laying out on my old college sheets while I folded laundry. I still hadn't quite gotten over my high school sweetheart, but being a freshman sure came with plenty of potential. Move, will ya? I shoved her aside, briefly ignoring her question as I placed the first of many tank tops on the bed. It was nice, I offered, unable to hide a smile at the end of the all-too-innocent statement. Did you tickle his pickle? She laughed, poking my exposed leg. The nickname came from how I first met Kevin in the cafeteria, when he asked for the pickle that had come with my sandwich. I happily obliged, not immediately understanding it might have simply been an excuse to get my number later. Ha. Don't you have a test to study for or something? Nope. Benefits of being an English major, she replied with a wink. With the blue-eyed blonde thing she had going for her, plus her parents' fortune, I didn't always know why she bothered going with me to university at all. Oh, right. The parties. I sighed and gave her the short story of our first date, with Kevin, and though she totally called it about love at first sight, I didn't believe her until about a year and a half later, when he opened up to me about his past. It formed a deeper connection with a boy than any I'd had before, possibly even including my dad. Kev, honey, it's just a building. You don't have to worry about the religious stuff or anything. It'll be okay. I rubbed his arm tenderly, hoping to alleviate any concerns he might have welling up from childhood. I pulled lightly to find him rock solid in place. Frozen, babe? I asked, my mind racing to every conversation about his past we ever had, searching for words of comfort. The commotion around us seemed to die down as I tried desperately to focus on getting him through what I assumed was some sort of panic attack. EMS, I don't know what's wrong. I'm trying, I really am. He shivered forward and stopped like a shitty mime. For a second I thought he might be fucking with me anyway until I saw a flat edge form on the shoulder of his shirt, directly in line with the threshold of the entrance. He finally looked up to me, his eyes turning red from crying. I can't enter. I know it's between semesters and all, but I was thinking maybe we could have a small holiday, just the two of us, before heading home this year. I bit my lip expectantly, wondering if he was ready for a sort of next level to our relationship. The previous year had felt like a whirlwind romance to the point that we'd both planned the flights ahead of time to save money. By the time the Christmas music was playing in stores, it was too late to change the schedule. He looked away, one of the first times I saw him that serious since we said the I love yous. Amanda was out at some party, no surprise, which gave the two of us some alone time before finals week. During the short pause I ran various scenarios through my mind. Had I asked too soon? Was this overkill? Shit, maybe his family had a huge gathering every year. Or worse, he was torn between divorced parents, barely able to see both enough over the winter break. A moment later he sat down on my half-made bed, then reached for my arm as though to tell me to sit as well. Little did I know what he was about to reveal. Considering all the possibilities running through my head, I don't, he began, fighting some urge to keep his secrets his own. I waited eagerly, almost forgetting to breathe, before he pushed past whatever walls he kept locked inside. I don't celebrate Christmas. Or any holiday, really. It came out like a sigh. I followed the obvious script. Oh. Why not? He cleared his throat like wiping away the dust on the memory. Holidays in my family were not normal. My parents, they fought over us like livestock. Of course they have to go to church, and didn't you watch the documentary? His head shook with widened eyes as he pretended to be his parents. It got so bad they wound up getting divorced, which I know is getting to be pretty common these days and all, but after my mom, he tried to explain, tears welling up around the corners of his eyes. At the time I felt a whole lot of mixed emotions considering the mood and how this was the first time he'd ever really told me about his childhood. He swallowed nothing and breathed hard. After he finished with rolling a hand, suggesting she'd passed on. My brother and I lived with my dad. 3 guys in one house. I guess things tend to get a little, I don't know. I could handle the prayers and being good for G's. He coughed. Clearly the memory of his strict father was bringing up some old emotions, things he tried to skip over to get it all out. Chris rebelled. For the both of us, I think, considering my dad's temper. The night it all happened he looked at me with these hard eyes. Like he'd made a decision that would have a big impact on things. Do you? I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, Father, but would you mind? It hadn't been terribly difficult to find an English-speaking pastor in Rome. The two of us had spent the majority of the previous afternoon talking things out. I can go back to the Pantheon another time, and though Kevin could hardly form any coherent sentences, he seemed determined as ever. The next morning, something's wrong in me, EMS, and I want it fixed. I'd met the pastor inside the third local church we visited, shortly before lunch. After convincing him to come with me outside to meet Kevin, we explained the strange occurrence. Along with our ramblings, Kevin once more tried to cross the threshold, his attempts showing resistance that defied any normal understanding of physics. I didn't believe you at first, but after what you just showed me, well. Give me a moment, will you? A minute passed before he returned, carrying a small glass. Hold out your hand, if you would. Kevin held out his hand. The priest swallowed, then dipped his fingers into the glass and flicked a bit of the liquid towards him. He jolted in pain as we watched the water cinch his skin with a sizzle. I moved to comfort him, the shock taking a moment to hit me while the pastor mumbled some kind of quick prayer and crossed himself. This isn't some sort of prank, is it? He asked, seeming to regret his words once he saw the fear in Kevin's eyes. Come back later tonight. Whatever's taken hold inside you, we'll find a way to get it out. I lost my family that day, he said quickly, like air finally escaping from a soda bottle. I could tell from the tone he would need time to mention the specifics, but my first instinct told me his brother traded his own life to save Kevin, by any means necessary. A few months later he confirmed my theory. Orphaned in high school, his only sibling rotted away in prison only 5 months before he pissed off the wrong person, and Kevin's been holding on to some fierce kind of guilt since. Our relationship wasn't strained as much as I initially suspected it might. If anything, we grew closer. Something about opening up his raw history to me cut open some wounds of my own, and we healed together. I was no stranger to therapy, and hearing he'd gone through some himself seemed to lift any remaining weights off my chest. I intended to keep my dearest preoccupied until nightfall, but the exhaustion had drained him enough that he passed out as soon as we got back to the hotel. I suppose I hadn't noticed how little sleep he'd gotten the previous night. In the meantime, I scoured the internet as fast as I could, searching for what could prevent someone from entering a church. What kinds of spirits or beings had violent reactions to holy water? Anything that could prepare us, for what was to come. As I'm sure you know, the results suggested nothing good. Night came quickly, halting my research to wake Kevin for our meeting with the pastor. I snuck out a little early to grab us something light to eat, surprising him with some expensive Spanish ham and crusty bread. The darkness seemed to cling to him as we walked back to the church. Like the shadows knew something we didn't, but fortunately he didn't seem to notice. Perhaps it was simply some web-induced paranoia on my part. "Come, down here," the priest met us to the side of the building, before ushering us along an alleyway. He moved quickly, the long robes scraping the cobbled stones we traversed. We passed through an old wooden door, part of me wondering if Kevin would even be able to cross. Luckily, no issue. Inside stood two nuns who both muttered and crossed themselves at our arrival. The priest closed the door behind us and moved to an altar where he unwrapped a fist-sized cross, prayed, and kissed the top of it before leading us to a basin of water just in case, he explained, dropping in the cross. The nuns carried a tall, makeshift bed over the basin that had only a few slats. I shortly realized they were easily removable to allow whoever lay upon them, i.e. Kevin, to fall through to the water below should something go wrong. What that might be, I didn't want to even consider. The rest happened more quickly than I had time to process. Kevin lay over the bath of holy water, his arms and legs strapped to the corner slats. One nun stood on either side, ready at a moment's notice to plunge him into potential oblivion. The priest cleared his throat, looking to see if he was ready, and if I really wanted to stay as a witness. I didn't move. But a second later Kevin asked, "Hey, EMS? Yeah, babe? Thanks for being here for me. I don't know what I'd do without you." He laughed, tears welling up in both of our eyes. "I was going to wait till dinner our last day, but in case our vacation gets cut short." He paused, adjusting his arms against the restraints, then looked at me. "What do you say we get married?" I lost it. I'd been able to stay together for him this long, but after that I couldn't control myself. I stood there in a mixture of emotions, shaking, mind racing with an unbelievable daydream of our potential future. "You don't have to answer now, of course. I just thought that. Anyway," he nodded to the others. "Let's get this over with." I like to think I went into some form of shock around then. Otherwise I doubt I'd remember any of what happened. It was like my brain said, "Listen Emily, take your emotions and go in the corner for now. You can't be a distraction if Kevin's going to be cured, okay? Atta girl." The priest began reciting what I assumed to be Latin. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd never been terribly religious. The nuns waited like racehorses behind the gates, ready to run and drop Kevin into the water if anything went wrong. He breathed a little heavily, but otherwise it all seemed to be going all right. Until the pastor crossed himself and shook holy water on him. Kevin cried out as the liquid burned his skin. The words tore into the wounds and sent him squirming on the bed, pulling at the restraints in pain. The priest crossed himself a second time, amplifying his voice to combat the reaction. He shook more violently, nearly sending the planks into the basin, but the nuns quickly adjusted their hold. Kevin began to cry out in anguish, yells that echoed throughout the room. "It's going to be okay," my brain whispered to me. "He'll be all right." More droplets of holy water splashed upon him. Kevin's movements sped up, faster and faster until they breached what I would consider the limits of a human body. Veins pressed against his skin, turning black, as his screams went deep. The priest yelled out the final words with more holy water and a final cross. Kevin went limp. A moment passed. Then another. Suddenly, Kevin's eyes went wide and he reached his head out towards the ceiling. A thick, black smoke poured out from his mouth, seemingly taking the color from his veins. It spun around the room once, twice, 3 times before slamming into the ground and vanishing. The wooden floor lay charred as the room became silent. The nuns and priest looked to each other and nodded, then began untying his legs and arms. I rushed to Kevin's side as his eyes fluttered open and closed, placing my hand against his cheek. Kevin. Sweetie, can you hear me? He mumbled, shutting his eyes closed and placing a hand upon his head. Oh my fucking god. The others gave him a dirty look, then left. Babe, how are you feeling? I asked. Major headache. Holy fuck, he exhaled, opening his eyes. Well, and who might you be? I froze. I'm your girlfriend? You better not be joking around, asshole. He nodded in appreciation, no signs of recognition. Nice. So, where are we again? And why do you keep calling me Kevin? I could feel the color drain from my face. He'd never been able to lie to me, not without laughing partway through and ruining the joke. But this time, his eyes seemed sharp. Like he wasn't messing around. Like he wasn't. Kevin, what am I supposed to call you, then? Was all I could manage. The name's Chris. Chris Lid. He stood, stretching out as though he'd just woken from a long nap. Chris. Wait, Kevin's brother? I asked, surprised my mind could still function. Lady, I never had a brother. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna bounce. See you around. I lost him about a month ago. My Kevin. I don't know if Chris formed a split personality or had been lying to me the whole time, but after everything that happened I have a different theory. One I'm working on researching. Kevin, wherever you are, whoever you are, I will find you again. And my answer is yes. Z.